Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Truth That Heals podcast. Today, I have a special guest. Her name is Angie. Angie, nice to have you with us. How are you doing?
I'm good, Ryan. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here talking with you.
So I met you. Well, actually, I've never met you, but I've sort of met you through a friend. Her name is Kelly. She
Yes.
also has her own podcast. Shout out to Kelly. She's on the Unbroken podcast. Um,
Woo, Kelly.
and she's amazing. And I wanted to just express how honored I am to have you here with us on my podcast. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
So, the name of the podcast is The Truth That Heals. So, I've made a platform where people can speak their truth, but at the same time, the goal is to kind of arrive towards healing. So, I would like to ask you if you can give us a little bio about yourself.
Yeah. So I am a child abuse survivor. My abuse started when I was very young, and I had no memory of it until about 7 years ago. So in many ways, I was very, I might say, lucky that I didn't have memories of it. I was able to grow up. I'm a registered nurse, and I've been a nurse for almost 20 years. I ended up getting married. I went through an abusive marriage and ended up finally being able to divorce my husband. I grew up in a very religious household. My abuse happened at church by friends of my parents. And so growing up in a very religious, my parents are very, very conservative Christian. And it was I grew up Mormon, or in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And there was um, uh, I don't know what else to call it. So I call it a pedophile cult that was hiding out within the congregation that we went to. So anyway, about 7 years ago, I had a mental breakdown. Some things happened in my life that started these memories coming back. Started abusing alcohol and ended up checking myself into an inpatient psychiatric hospital for about a month in order to not harm myself. I definitely was at a place where I was ready to end everything. And that began a pretty intensive journey into healing from the years of child abuse that I experienced.
So you said that you had forgotten so much.
I
Uh,
had no memory of it. Yeah.
was there something that kind of triggered it?
There was. I was dating somebody and was in a pretty serious relationship, and I found out my partner was cheating on me because they posted on social media that they had a new partner and while we were still together. And so that betrayal by my partner, someone who was supposed to love me and care about me, unlocked the memories of my child abuse. So I was actually dealing with dueling traumas, the trauma of my partner cheating on me and telling me in such a public way, as well as now these memories of horrific child abuse coming out.
So as I'm hearing your story, because well, me, I like to, read memoirs and watch YouTube and hear other people's stories because as I'm hearing their stories, it helps me to understand that I'm also a victim and that I can, get over this dark moment. But I'll be honest, when I was in the darkest hour, it was just the most painful. So I
Mhm.
kind of want to, I don't want to go in too deep in the questions, but I kind of want to understand how is it that you were able to face this darkness after 20 years of it hiding?
Uh, that's a really good question. And I don't, I'm laughing partially because, just FYI, that is my trauma response. Um, I don't know. I don't know how I faced it. It was almost like, uh, somebody asked me what was the first step that I took, and it wasn't even a step. It was, for me, it was a crawl, like a baby crawl. I could only take it almost one moment at a time. It was so overwhelmingly painful. That's why I did start abusing alcohol. And that is ultimately why I did check myself into a psychiatric unit that specialized in trauma, because I knew I couldn't handle it myself. It was so overwhelming. It was so painful, and it was so all-consuming that I needed way more support than what I was going to get on my own.
So when these memories started coming back, that was, I believe you said 13 years ago,
Only
7?
7 years ago.
So 7 years ago, were you still involved in the Church of Mormon, Latter-day Saints?
Yeah, so they go they used to go by Mormons. They now prefer to be called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I will use them interchangeably, the LDS Church or Mormonism, because when I was growing up in it, they were used interchangeably. And the answer is no. I had left the Mormon Church about it's been 12 years now. I left the Mormon Church shortly after my divorce, which was about 13 or 14 years ago. So I had already left the Mormon Church, which I think is what did help enable me to be at a place where I could start to handle the memories that were coming out. I don't know that I could have handled them, or that they would have even come out had I still been active in the church.
And was there like well, you have mentioned that there was abuse happening,
There was.
but was there like a pivotal moment where you said, "That's it, I'm out of here"?
There was. So I had stopped going to church. I was no longer active Mormon about 13 years ago. And then only about, I would say, 3.5, 4 years ago, did I actually go through the formal process of having the Mormons term it your membership revoked. So you have to actually send a letter to the LDS church headquarters in Utah and ask to have your membership revoked. You have to go through kind of this formal process. And I did that about 4 years ago. And the reason I did that is because I had found out that the current Mormon prophet, the current leader of the Mormon church, his daughter, so I had had some memories. I'm going to have to do a little backstory on this one. So I had had some memories come out. I experienced what is called ritualistic child sexual abuse. So there were a lot of rituals involved in the abuse that I experienced. And I had had a particularly horrific memory that I was dealing with in therapy, and I just couldn't even, like, my logical grown-up brain couldn't even process it. And there was some very specific phrasing of things that had happened, and I had gone and Googled them just to see if there was anything else out there, because I was feeling like I was crazy for what I was remembering. And it turns out that the current Mormon prophet, or the current LDS prophet, his daughter was accused in a lawsuit of the same thing that I had had memories come out of, or a very similar thing. And when I realized that someone that high up in the church was being accused of the same memories, now she denied it. The lawsuit was dismissed. So allegedly, I should probably say, but she was allegedly accused of doing the same crimes. I no longer was willing to even be considered a member, active or inactive. I wanted my membership completely cut off. So I am now no longer in any way, shape, or form Mormon.
So did the Church of Latter-day Saints, well, first of all, I have a question, because
Yes.
like in Catholicism, we have like, they're called like parishes. I guess
Yes.
that'll be like kingdom halls or something, or for you guys, I think it's temples, or
So in
I don't know.
Mormonism, it's called a ward. It's
Okay.
the congregation that you go to church with on Sundays is called your ward. And then about 6 or 7 of these wards or congregations make up what's called a stake. And so it's kind of divided into hierarchy depending on the group that you go with, and then it goes to a larger area, and then it kind of expands up to the whole church in general. So my abuse was happening in my ward, or my specific congregation, and the daughter of the prophet was accused of doing similar things in a different ward, in a different congregation with a different group of people, completely unrelated to what to the people, at least to my knowledge, she was not ever involved in what I was experiencing. It was a different group of people.
Okay. So when these things happened, um, like, is there anyone that you can go to from the leadership in your ward, or do you have to go to a higher council? How does that work?
Um, so the answer is yes, and that, you know, it's never quite as clear cut.
Mhm.
In theory, Mormons are supposed to be able to go to their leaders. My abuse started when I was about a year and a half. And so because I was so young and that was all I knew from such a young age, I didn't even know that what was happening was really so I was told it was what God wanted, and so I never questioned it, because these were people who were friends of my parents. They were also leaders in the congregation. In the Mormon church, they have what they call lay clergy, which means that they're not people who have actually gone and studied. They're just normal, I'm going to put that in quotes, they're just general people who are in the congregation. And then Mormons believe that God gives a revelation to someone who's in a position of leadership, that so and so is now supposed to have this calling or this position of leadership. And they only serve in these callings for 3-ish years, and then someone new is put into that position. And so they're constantly rotating. So for me, with my abuse, my abusers were actually leaders in the congregation. They went through periods of being the leaders in the congregation and being actively involved in the ward, the congregation that we went to. So I could not have gone to my leaders, even if I had known what was happening was wrong. But like I said, because mine started when I was so young, I didn't, and I believe that God wanted it, because these people were being put in positions of leadership and power. My child brain just took it as they were, you know, this is what God wanted. So I didn't question. But yes, in theory, Mormons are supposed to be able to go to their leaders, and if they don't get the response that they feel comfortable with, there is a someone higher or someone else that they can go speak with.
So you really had no one to really speak to from the leadership, and no one to kind of put an end to it.
No, I don't know exactly when it stopped. I have not gone back and really delved into those memories. I do know that when I was about 14, things changed. And I'm assuming that it went probably up until I left for college at age 18 or shortly thereabouts. Because of some of the stuff that happened, my assumption is that it did go on for most of my teenage years.
And
I mean, in addition to my childhood.
I'm I watched recently, maybe a month or two ago. I think it was called The Keepers on Netflix. I'm not sure if you've heard of it or seen it.
I have not, but I have to admit, I have to stay away from some of those shows
Okay.
because I get really a lot triggered by them. So I might have heard of it and just chosen not to watch it.
Okay, yeah, don't
But you
watch it.
can talk about it. I don't
Yeah,
have a problem.
yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about it.
It's just that the story is very similar, but in this case, it was in a Catholic
Mm,
school with little girls, and I don't want to get into like the dirty details,
yeah.
but before the things happened, the priest would tell the victims, this is how God loves you, or something like that. And it
Yes.
sounds like they told you something similar, how that this is God's expression of his love.
Yes, God's expression of his love. It was that God was trying to help me learn how to be good. He was trying to help me learn how to be the most righteous, divine being that I could be. Um, I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but I would be um, punished, and I put that in quotes for anybody who's not watching the video. I would be punished because I did things that were, according to my abusers, disrespectful to God. Mormons call God Heavenly Father. So I would be doing things that are disrespectful to Heavenly Father. But those things when I was 3 were like, I would go to the bathroom at church, or I would eat a snack, because Mormon had, back then we went to church for 3 hours a day on Sundays. And then I would be punished or molested as a way to teach me how to learn to be respectful to Heavenly Father. I was told that it was because I was so inherently bad that that was the only way that God could teach me how to be good and how to come back to live with him.
Wow, that's a lot, because this is supposed to be a holy place.
Hmm.
And even though, I mean, what they're doing is totally not holy, but they're in a position where you trust them,
Hmm.
you're you're around them, and these people are claiming to be, God's representatives. And so they were betraying that trust already at such a young age. First of all, I am so sorry that that evil had to happen, because it happens so much, but it's like religious people don't learn. And I hope it never happens. But I would like to ask, do you know if there were any other people in your community who were also going through similar circumstances?
I remember other children being involved. So there was a group. I had multiple abusers, and I do remember other children that were involved in many of the same activities. So my abusers did make child pornography with us. They used us to make child porn. And I do remember some of the other children that I was engaged in particular acts with while they were filming. However, the people, I remember a couple of specific people, they do not seem to have any memories of it. And I have never spoken to them about it, because I don't want to trigger something in them that they're not ready for. But there were other children that were being abused at the same time that I was.
Wow, again, that's something so terrible. And like, how does someone come to like understand the evil that's happening? Um,
That may be a rhetorical question, but that's a question that I've struggled with quite a bit, because my adult human brain cannot rationalize how can people do this so much, and not just what happened to me, but in all these instances. And I don't have an answer for that. I don't know how they can. I'll give them some benefit of the doubt and assume that they probably had experienced something similar growing up. Um, and that still doesn't excuse it, because I experienced it, have never perpetrated that on anybody, and am now working, in fact, to, you know, help others overcome their trauma. So there's only so much that I'm willing to allow for people's own upbringings and their own traumas.
yes. And did the church ever offer any like um real counseling, or any kind of support, or was it more like it's your fault?
Um, uh, it, it is more like my experience was more well, it was only a one-off, doesn't really happen very often. You just unfortunately were one of the few that experienced. The Mormon church says that they've come out and condemned it. They have had a lot of talks about how not it's against the Mormon religion, or it's against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints beliefs. And yet it gets a lot more complicated than that. So back in the 90s, so I'm 44, and so my abuse was happening, started in the 80s, went through the 80s and the 90s. Once again, I don't know exactly when it stopped. I left for college in 97. So, a pretty long stretch of time. And back in 1991, there was a position in a leadership, a person in a position of leadership in the LDS church, who wrote a memo to the LDS prophet. And the LDS, the Mormon church, they have a prophet who oversees the whole church. And this person by the name of Glenn Pace, he was in another position of leadership. He had written a memo to the prophet and the leaders of the Mormon church in 91 saying that he had investigated and had interviewed something like 60 people who all were claiming this ritualistic child sex abuse was happening to them. And they were from various different states, various different places, and they all had very similar stories. And the memo somehow got leaked to the public. But he also referenced that there were other memos and other information that the LDS Church had previously received talking about this problem with this ritualistic child sex abuse that was happening in the church. And nothing was done. Nothing, so the leaders came out, they gave talks about, it's a sin to abuse children, but there wasn't really any steps taken to make, in my opinion, there were not enough steps taken to make things safer for children. And in my opinion, there still are not enough safety measures in place for children in the LDS Church.
Yeah, I'm happy you mentioned that about the safety measures. I mean, the other stuff, of course, it's terrible, but I'm happy you brought that up because there definitely needs to be measures for safety because the children are the most innocent, the most vulnerable. They have no voice, and then sometimes when they do, ask for help, they're not believed because it's like I was talking with, I think it was Jehovah's Witnesses, and I believe that they have a rule where it's like if someone comes forward to talk about abuse or about some kind of infraction, there have to be two witnesses. And sometimes it's like, how's that going to work? It's like the system is made so that there's no real justice.
Yeah, it does not protect the children in many instances.
Yeah, and it's been happening. You said that they had memos leaked, and they still
Only the
had
one memo was leaked, but yeah, there were previous ones also mentioning it.
And how did you? Well, I'm trying to think. Like, well, there's so many questions, but these questions can be like, summed up to why wasn't like more action taking place, and maybe we'll never get an answer, or maybe they're protecting themselves. It's just sick.
I don't understand it. And I know this might be very controversial because there are a lot of people who believe in the Mormon faith. And I am not speaking bad about every single Mormon person out there. I'm saying that there is not enough of a system in place to protect children. And when you grow up in a fundamental religion where you believe that everybody is inherently good, and when you're taught that God is at the helm and controlling what happens in your church, you don't question your neighbors. So there is no discussion about body safety, especially in Mormonism and very conservative religions, talking about body safety and even premarital sex or sex in general, like having those open discussions for children to learn what it is or what even abuse is. When I was little, I remember trying to tell my parents that something was happening, but I didn't even have the language to be able to say, like, my feeling is, there's something wrong with this. I remember trying to tell my parents that one of my abusers was mean. He punished me because I was bad. And my definition of punished was very different than what my parents' interpretation of that word was. And I remember, I have since recovered memories, by the way. This is not stuff that I remembered until I started doing intensive therapy, of my parents just saying, oh, well, he's just trying to help you learn how to show Heavenly Father or God respect. They just didn't even comprehend, because I didn't have the language in order to even be able to express it. And for a lot of us growing up in very fundamental religions like that, we don't have language because that kind of stuff is not talked about, let alone the protections in place and, the belief that your neighbors are good and everybody's doing what God's commanding, when in reality, there have been studies done that show predators and pedophiles hang out in religious organizations because of this this kind of safety mechanism built into this protection, because religious congregations don't question as often as non-religious groups do.
So as a child, you went through the worst of the worst. You lack the language to
Mhm.
express yourself, because you did try to express that something was happening
Yes.
and you were not understood. And then so you repress these memories for so long, and then um someone whom you are in a deep relationship betrays that trust and does something that's, I mean, for those of you who are listening and you've been cheated on, or you've been you had your heart crushed, maybe they understand. And
Yeah,
and it's a terrible feeling.
it
It's
is.
it is.
That
It's like,
betrayal.
why you gotta be such a terrible person? It's like, why?
Why couldn't you just end it with me? Like, be honest with me. Yeah, yeah.
So I'm just trying to understand all of these things that happened to you, and how did you hold on to hope? Because I mean, here you are today, brave and telling your story, but also you also work on helping others to heal.
I do. There were many times, I'm going to fully admit, I didn't have hope. And in fact, hope is an emotion that is very painful for me. I remember hope is actually very uncomfortable. Not uncomfortable, it's painful. It's downright painful for me, because I remember as a child hoping for something different, hoping for someone to save me, and that never happened. So for me, hope has always been, you get your hopes up and then there's further to fall when it doesn't happen. And so I have to admit, hope is probably not a word I would use, because that is so painful for me.
Mhm.
I think it's more sheer determination that I wasn't going to let them win. Like, I didn't care what it was that I was not going to let them win. So I don't know that I would use the term hope, because that was really, in fact, still to today, hope is very challenging for me. And I think it was just sheer determination that I was not going to let them win. And there were times where I didn't even feel that. Like, it was, I've been through some dark times where even that was hardly not enough. I'm hardly enough to get me through. And oftentimes I didn't even want that to be enough. So I think it was more just kind of like a, you're not going to beat me.
Resilience.
Resilience. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Keep going.
no, so it's good that you speak your truth and share your story about how you feel about the healing journey, about your struggles with hope, because there are listeners out there who are coming from all walks of life, and it might resonate with someone who's like, yeah, I also have a hard time with hope, but I really liked what Angie said, because it's like, now, like, I want to fight back, and not in a villainous evil way, but now you're using your energy. You became, well, first of all, you became an RN,
I did.
and then you started this other journey, and we're going to get to that in the next episode. But
Yes.
just very briefly, you started doing this other healing journey. Can you share very briefly a little bit about what you do?
Yeah. I help people use play and movement to release stress, anxiety, tension, depression, and trauma, so they can have more joy and peace in their lives. As I was on my healing journey, I um, needed I needed movement. I needed a way to to release back, or to release all the trauma that I had. And by doing play and movement, it actually helped me to tap into the child part of my brain that was so, I was going to say destroyed, but it wasn't destroyed. That was so taken from me when I was a little, like the opportunity to be a true child. And so by tapping into play and that joyful love of movement and just fun that children have, it's actually a way to heal, and it helps to reform neural connections in our brain so that we can form new pathways. I one time heard not imagination. I one time heard trauma defined as the loss of imagination, the loss of the ability to see something different. And so by tapping into that creativity and imagination, it does create a whole new world, a whole new space that for me and for many of my clients that I work with has just profoundly changed our healing trajectories.
So wow, I can't wait to heal.
Heal.
Well, I can't wait to heal,
That
but
too, yeah.
that too. I can't wait to hear a little bit more details about this healing practice that you have and how it's helped not only you but also the clients who are under your care. But we're gonna save that for the next episode.
Yes.
And for the meantime, is there any links that you can share for listeners who are listening to this first episode?
Yeah. So the best way to get in touch with me is my website. It's angieberrettmovement.com. And I spell my last name Berrett. So just know we spell it a little bit funny. And you can get to, I have some of my story on there. If you want to hear more about my story, it has links to all of my social medias. I do a lot of talking about some of my history, my feelings. I do a lot of stuff on Instagram Reels, talking about shame. Shame's a big one that I'm working on right now. So that's one that I've done some on recently. So I do talk about not only my way of my movement practices, but also my own personal like struggles with healing from this child abuse that I experienced.
So thank you so much for sharing these handles and for sharing with us your experience of this absolute darkness, but how you didn't give up and how you're such a badass and a fighter, and how you keep going. And for the listeners, stay tuned because there's going to be a part 2, and you can hear a little bit more about what Angie does in her healing practice and how she's been able to not only move forward, but also help others in their healing journey as well. I am Ryan Anthony Hernandez, and I'm here with Angie Berrett. And that's it for today's episode. Until next time, this is the Truth That Heals podcast.